Today on Misunderstood with Rachel Uchitel.
Sherri Papini.
Sherri Papini.
Sherri Papini.
Sherri Papini. Sherri Papini. It's made national news. She was at the center of a 2016 kidnapping case.
Tell me the truth about what happened. What do you remember from that time?
It was 22 days of absolute hell.
Take me back to how you got released from James. You had so many chances to come clean. Why did you not take that opportunity?
Well, I didn't have the opportunity.
People are wondering why you would take a plea deal.
You can't beat a game that's already rigged.
Why are you writing the book now? Why are you talking now?
I'm reclaiming my life. It's time to tell the truth.
Every single day she committed to the lie.
In 2016, Sherri Papini disappeared while out for a jog near her home in Redding, California. For 22 days, the world searched. Her husband pleaded for her safe return. And when she reappeared, bruised, starved, shackled, with a chain, she told police she had been kidnapped by two Hispanic women at gunpoint. The story made headlines around the world, but as time passed and details unraveled, investigators said Sherri had staged the whole thing, running away voluntarily to stay with an ex-boyfriend and then fabricating the abduction. In 2022, she was sentenced to 18 months in prison for lying to federal agents and using victim funds fraudulently. Later, she admitted she had lied about the identities of her kidnappers, but she did insist she was abducted and was abused. Now, with a book and a documentary out of her own, among other documentaries that have been made about her and other books, Sherri Papini has started to speak. But today's conversation is different. Because in this episode of Misunderstood, Sherri tells something she hasn't said in any other interview. Trust me, I've watched everything. I've listened to every interview she's done. I know she's done a couple because she's promoting her book, but this one is different. She sits with me. Again, I did it on Zoom because she's in California and I'm in Palm Beach, but she was with me one-on-one, not with the script, not with a legal team, but with her own voice to answer the questions everyone has been wanting to ask. This is not a press tour moment. This is a raw, unfiltered conversation about why she did what she did, what she says actually happened during those 22 days, and how she explains the lie that changed the course of her life. And she gets into what the truth really is. This interview leaves no stone unturned, and when it's over, you'll walk away with more insight than you've heard in any headline or headline recap. You'll be forced to ask yourself, was Sherri Papini the liar she really was made out to be? Or is there a deeper truth we've refused to consider? Listen and let me know what you think. As always, thank you so much for tuning into Misunderstood. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please subscribe and leave us a review. It means everything to me. You can also watch the full interview on YouTube. And if you want to hear our personal reactions right after we wrapped, head over to our Apple subscriptions or Patreon for our bonus conversation, exclusively available there. So let's get into my conversation with Sherri Papini. Sherri, I am so excited that you are here on Misunderstood. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really happy that you're here and that you're speaking out.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
So I wanted to start off by just really getting to the point, because before we started the show, I reminded everybody of your story. So we kind of got the facts in there, but I want to play a little game with you for 1 second. I would love for you, take yourself out of being Sherri Papini for a minute. And if anyone is listening and they don't know your story and you were just like, oh my God, there's this girl on Misunderstood and we're about to hear her story. How would you, in 2 or 3 paragraphs, not very long, how would you just describe who this person is, what the saga was, what the scandal was? Just explain it in your words. I'm just curious how you would perceive or how you would tell that story.
I would tell the story in 2016. I went missing and was kidnapped and then was subsequently released 22 days later. And upon my release, I was absolutely terrified to name the identity of my captor and was pretty viciously interrogated and came out with a lie made as a cover-up to keep the identity of my captor secret, and then it blew up around the world. And then law enforcement, through their investigation 6 years later, determined that the identity of my captor was, in fact, an ex-boyfriend, not two women that I had initially told them. And I was too fearful to come out and tell my ex-husband at the time that I was having an emotional affair. And when the story broke, my entire life fell apart. And then I was arrested and signed a plea agreement to take accountability for my deception in not naming my captor, and got a really raw deal. And then the media storm that there was films and documentaries and article after article created about me without me, and a lot of misinformation and a lot of things that were mistaken by the media that created this firestorm that completely obliterated my life, for which I'm still suffering the consequences of, and trying to navigate picking up the pieces and moving forward from now, and actually reclaiming my voice and participating in speaking to the media.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. I prefer to hear it from you rather than me recapping it. Do you know what I mean? So you just came out with a book, Sherri Papini Doesn't Exist, which, by the way, I can't wait to read. I just ordered it. So, and one of the sort of subtitles, it starts off with The Lie That Defined Me. What is that lie in your mind that defined you?
I think currently there's a huge misconception that now that I'm speaking, there is a new story. That's what keeps getting spun out of control. And from day one, I have always maintained that I was kidnapped and tortured and brutalized. I have never changed that. And in fact, went at great length to go into great detail about every injury that occurred, down to like the last fragment of carpet describing the room. I was simply just too afraid to tell anyone his identity, and was up against insurmountable odds and between a rock and a hard place. So it's not a new story that everyone is concluding that it is. It is the same story. We just have more information about the identity of the captor.
Right. So the lie the big lie though was who did it. I mean, the
cover-up.
Right. The lie was not that you were kidnapped. The lie was not that you got abused. The lie was who did it. And in your own words, why I feel like so many people cannot understand that lie. And I want to get into the background of why that it was so important. But just succinctly now, why in that moment? Because I think a lot of us have seen some of the documentaries. I have had the opportunity. I've been very lucky to have gotten to listen to a lot of things that people have not gotten to listen to, in terms of, people, being interrogated, and 2.5 hours of all sorts of things that people have not heard. And we'll get into that as well. But why, in all the times that you were asked who did it, you had so many chances to come clean, right? I mean, let's be honest. Why do you think you did not take the opportunity in all of those multiple times to come clean? Even if Keith wasn't in the room, Keith being your ex-husband, why did you not take that opportunity?
Well, I didn't have the opportunity. So to be clear, every interrogation, which you've seen videos of, he's sitting next to me. The only time he wasn't sitting next to me is when I was faced with the obstacle of removing him from the room. So when I was asked, it's like when law enforcement comes to investigate a house call, for example, they'll interview you and remove the husband, but you can still see him standing outside the door, and then they leave. So for them to say, would you like us to remove Keith from the room? I had to answer that in front of him, and I was completely terrified to say yes, because he was still standing outside the door, and then I would have to go home with him afterwards. It's not like law enforcement went home with me to protect me from him. I had to manage this situation where I was in jeopardy of the punishment that I would suffer if it got out to my husband that I was having an emotional affair. That fear was very great for me. Secondary, I knew that I had already lied to law enforcement, and I was in a huge bind. I didn't know how to navigate unraveling the cover-up of the identity of my captor. And in that interview, I asked for a lawyer not once, but twice. And generally in interrogations, they are supposed to stop and grant you audience with a lawyer, and that didn't happen. I didn't have an advocate, and it was 3 very aggressive men against me. And thirdly, when I was in captivity, during captivity, James Reyes mentioned multiple times that he was addicted to crime shows, and he'd witnessed when interrogations were leaked on the internet and broadcasted. And so he'd already set up during the brainwashing and during the torture of 22 days that he would be watching everything, ensuring that I didn't come forward and disclose his identity. And that was part of my negotiation tactic to get home and to stay alive. Okay. So those compacted on top of each other really make this conclusion of this choice where I made the best choice that I could. And for me, I wasn't thinking about lying to law enforcement or committing a crime. I was thinking about being safe. I was thinking about keeping myself safe. I was thinking about being home with my children. I wasn't thinking about trying to lie to people or create this big lie that spun out of control. For me, it was, how do I manage a situation and stay safe in the situation? That was the best that I could do. And I regret it. I have deep regret and sorrow for not being more courageous to be more truthful and be able to exclaim that from the mountaintops from day one. But initially, my very first interrogation was in the hospital, and it wasn't with law enforcement. It was my ex-husband, who I could not say that I was having an emotional affair with. Mm-hmm. You know, they fixated a recording device to him, and he led the interrogation first.
Okay. So, but let me ask you a question about that. What does your emotional affair with James beforehand have to do with him taking you? And I mean, let's say that it started in a nice way and you wanted to be with him, and then all of a sudden he got abusive and then you wanted to leave and come home. Either way, it doesn't matter. The abuse happened, you were kidnapped and you got out. And the point is why at some point, I think a lot of people want to know, whether it was to your husband or anyone else, would you not just say, listen, this was not consensual. I'm not trying to be with this man. I was abused. I was raped. I was anything that happened. Why wouldn't you have just come clean? I'm trying to get to the point of why you are so fearful of that.
Well, and I appreciate that question. That is a fantastic question. There is an interrogation that's been released online where law enforcement officers are interrogating Keith Papini. Mm-hmm. And in this interrogation, you very clearly hear Keith say that I apologize, I don't have the transcripts in front of me, so I apologize if it's not the exact words, but he says, I don't know what's worse, her having an affair or being abducted. Mm-hmm. Like, for your husband to say it's potentially worse to find out that she could have potentially been kidnapped and tortured, it already sets a precedence that he doesn't care what happened to me. He cares about his image, and he cares about me having any type of emotional affair. That is a level of control that demonstrates his authority and his capability to punish me if he finds out that something's unacceptable to him. And frankly, he has friends in law enforcement, and he knows everybody in town. He has this huge reputation and this huge clout in town. There was nowhere for me to go to find any safety. There was no way to get away from him.
So something I want to bring up that some people may know or not know, you signed a post-nup based on the fact that he had found out you had had some emotional relationships or whatever the issues were. He had asked you to sign a post-nup. This was, I'm assuming, before the abduction, correct?
Yes. And, that's interesting. I love that you bring that up. Thank you so much. Keith Papini is interrogated by law enforcement, and he gives one answer. He says that it's because I was having an emotional affair that he had caught me in. Then he gets in his Hulu documentary and he says another thing. And then he's on the stand under oath and states that it's just because I was bad with money. And in his Hulu documentary, I believe he says it was just to try and keep his assets safe or whatever. So it's like you witness Keith Papini himself being this accomplished con artist and giving you 3 different testimonies on 3 different occasions. And it's infuriating for the entire world to say that they can't trust anything that comes out of my mouth. And yet some of the key players that have major culpability in my case are right in front of your face. and are demonstrated liars,
Right.
accomplished liars, and they're getting away with it.
But what I want to establish, okay, I thank you for saying that. What I want to establish for people that are listening, that is an important potential factor. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Sure.
But you go and you sign a postnup, which essentially says that if you get a divorce, you get nothing. And I think you don't have access to your kids. Am I correct?
Well, the postnuptial agreement was created prior to having children, which is another factor that demonstrates that the postnuptial agreement is null and void. Originally, when you get a postnuptial agreement, you're supposed to have dual representation. And what I mean by that is I'm supposed to have a lawyer, he's supposed to have a lawyer, in order to make sure that it's an appropriate agreement. I didn't have dual representation. This was sign this postnuptial agreement as fast as possible or get out. And it was a way for him to have this coercive control in our marriage, to take control of not only all the assets, but I mean, he states in the postnuptial agreement, all I get is like paint supplies and the things from my crafting room. I got nothing, and there was no process to edit it in the many years that happened after when we together assumed more assets and together created this life.
Right.
It was a very flimsy postnuptial agreement, but when it was put into trial, I was in prison. So I didn't have the opportunity to fight it. I didn't need to prepare with my legal team to get it thrown out, frankly. And it's really unfortunate.
Okay. I agree. That's an unfortunate postnup, and to not have representation for yourself. Always, I would never suggest that anyone does that. But what I'm trying to establish is possibly a motivation of like what people would think that you want to eventually get out of this relationship. You're starting to have emotional relationships with other people or friendships that maybe Keith doesn't approve of. By the way, Sherri, I'm not saying that any of this is wrong or things that people do not do on a daily basis. So by no means take that. I'm just trying to establish that I don't, in all that, I have like 15 pieces of paper in front of me. I watched every one of your documentaries. I followed this when it happened. The motivation for you to leave, fake a kidnapping, come back and still end up with your husband didn't make sense, right? So I'm trying to establish for people that are listening, you did sign this postnup, which would give you nothing if you left the marriage. And now here you are. How many years had you been married and had kids by the time you were abducted?
Like 8 years.
Okay, so you're 8 years in, you have 2 young children. You are maybe not the happiest person and don't know how to maybe get out or make it better. And you start to have emotional affairs with people that, as anyone who's had an affair may know, it's because they listen to you because you don't feel heard. They act like they care about you. They make you feel worthy. They make you feel beautiful, things that you may not be getting at home. And again, I'm not even pointing a finger at Keith. It might just be where your relationship was. So you tell me in your own words, where was your relationship at this point right before you got abducted?
Well, and I think that that's a fantastic point. I mean, for me, at the time, I was very emotionally immature and I had this external validation rather than internal validation.
Which, by the way, we all have gone through. Okay.
And it wasn't, I think that there's this misconception that I was only hiding men's names under women's names, and it's not. I wasn't allowed to have any established relationship, whether it was female or male, if it didn't match his criteria. So there was a level of scrutiny that I was under when it came to this choice. Like, it had to be acceptable by Keith. So even if I had friends from my past, if they didn't meet a certain status, I wasn't allowed to speak to them. So when we're constricted in that way, and we have this little demonstration of taking our own power back by having this secret life, which is what I was doing. I was having secret conversations with people because I was so desperate for some kind of connection. I was incredibly lonely. I mean, my husband had established a rule that I wasn't allowed to talk to him past 6 o'clock at night. So I wasn't allowed to have friends.
I heard you say that. Can you explain what that meant? Like, you literally weren't allowed to talk to him?
Yeah. That means when he got home from work, he didn't want to hear from me. He didn't want to have conversations. I thought that getting married meant being with your best friend. I thought that it meant having this deep connection with someone, and to be cut off all of the time and just be used for this one thing. It was not what I expected a marriage to be. And it wasn't like I wasn't trying. Even in 2016, when I was very emotionally mature, I was reading podcasts, I was buying books, I was trying everything I could to try and manage a relationship I was getting nothing from. And secretly trying to figure out how I could move on with my life, because I had these two children, and I was miserable. I was miserable being married to him, and I had no idea where to go and what to do. And knowing I lived in Reading and that he could, at the snap of a finger, just completely destroy my reputation and my life.
And also for many people that are listening that know this very well, you could be married, you don't have a job, you're taking care of the kids, you want a divorce, but then what are you going to do? You have to go back to work. How are you going to take your kid? There's going to be an argument. How are you going to pay for your lawyer? Who's going to get custody of the kids? It's going to ruin your whole life. And I think people feel very stuck. I caution people to judge what you were going through at that moment, because I feel like there are many women who, and I know plenty of them, who are in miserable relationships or just bland. It doesn't have to be miserable because there's like abuse or weird things going on. It's just they're bored to death and they want a love story, and they don't, they do absolutely nothing with their lives because they cannot go anywhere. They don't have any skills anymore because they haven't worked forever. They don't even know how to get a job. And it's a terrible predicament to be in. So is it safe to say that in 2016, in November, that you were feeling like you were very trapped and that you would have liked to have found a way to leave the relationship?
I opened myself up to a very dangerous predator. I was very susceptible and vulnerable, and left the door wide open for someone who really preyed on my vulnerability of my misery. Yeah.
Now, what I think it's important to note is that the person that you were with for those 22, 23 days was someone you knew in the past, trusted, had a relationship with. Can we talk a little bit about that and your history? This morning, I listened to 2 hours of him talking about his past with you and how he knew you and his big hockey career, blah, blah, blah. I want to hear your side now.
Well, when James and I dated, we didn't date for very long. It was very clear that we weren't a good match, and our relationship ended very abruptly. In fact, I packed my car and moved away in one day when he was staying late at work. And when our relationship opened back up, it was because he had a brother that passed away, and he contacted my mom, and he found that in. And to me, that felt safe because I knew we were just texting. I knew he lived in Southern California. And so it was kind of like almost like an internet connection. We only talked over the phone. It wasn't like I was personally seeing him. And to me, it was like James knew that I had to keep him secret, and he knew that I was afraid of Keith. So we had this opportunity where he just got to kind of slide in there. And when I was dating him, his behavior was completely different than the behavior that I know as of my abduction in 2016. So whatever happened to him in those years from the early 2000s when I was in my 20s to now when the abduction happened in 2016, he went from like amateur level disturbing person to like next level professional sexual sadism situation. And I missed all of those years. I have no idea. We do know that his Facebook posts leading up to the abduction were very dark and very disturbing. And when we spoke, he did share a little bit of things with me, but not enough for me to give really a clear indication of the danger that I was opening the door to.
So at what point did you start to move your communication to those burner phones?
Keith had caught a conversation that I had, and I had told James it was done, that I'd gotten caught and I was too afraid and I had to stop. And James convinced me to take the burner phones because he had a different idea and he didn't want to stop communication. And so he sent a burner phone to my mom's office. and I received it. And, he'd continue to use these idle threats of, if I don't do this, then he's just going to blow up my life. He's going to show up to Reading and he's going to tell my husband about what's going on. And,
But what was going on? I mean, listen, in listening to this guy for 2.5 hours speak, the guy is not that smart. He's not that sexy. There's nothing interesting about him. So girl to girl, explain to me the kind of conversations you were having with this dude.
Well, that's just it. Is there, I think there's a lot of fixation on this emotional affair, and you have to define what that means for me. I wasn't sexting him. I wasn't sending him graphic photos. We weren't talking about sexual innuendos or anything like that. It was just conversation. It was like having a conversation and having a friend. But that in and of itself was already completely unacceptable to Keith. And he knew that. He knew how afraid I was at Keith getting even a glimpse of any engagement of a relationship with someone else.
So when you say that Keith caught your first conversation or a conversation, was there anything inappropriate in that conversation that he actually caught?
No.
So
No, it was just that I was
you were talking to a man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you move to having these private conversations. And again, is it just like telling him about your life because you can't really talk to your husband? Is it very innocent things? Like what are we talking about when you say you wanted to continue this or he wanted to continue this? What did you want to continue? Why did you feel connected to him?
I was doing a lot of complaining, really. It was someone that was listening to me. I was doing a lot of complaining about my marriage, and I was doing a lot of complaining about the misery that I was suffering, and how much that I was trying to figure out and navigate how I was no longer going to be married to Keith. So I think to James, it was like if he could plant a flag, right? If he could establish getting his foot in the door, maybe when I broke up with Keith, I would choose him, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So I think it was really like this grooming process that he did not want to lose communication with me because he had an indication of my misery and an indication that I was trying to figure out how I would eventually dissolve my marriage.
But was he like giving you good advice? I mean, again, this guy sounds so clueless about things like this. Like, what kind of like, why not pick a better guy that you could have an emotional affair with who's like giving you amazing advice? Like, what kind of conversations were these?
Well, and I mean that I wasn't able to like go to Starbucks and make new friends. It was
Right.
what little people I had accessibility to. James was just accessible to me. And he was someone that was a good listener and someone that was there for me. And again, I think he wanted to make sure that he could shoot his shot eventually. So it was like that, like, I'm going to shoot my shot. I know that you're really miserable and, maybe I can save you from your marriage. Maybe I'm going to be that next person. So there was like this trying to convince me to leave my husband and trying to convince me that the grass was greener, so to speak.
So was he giving you ideas of like, hey, I want to be with you. This would be amazing. You can come down and see me. And I mean, I know from seeing on this last documentary you just did that you said, you finally admitted, yeah, you were kind of planning on maybe doing it. Whether or not you were going to go through with it is a whole nother story, but you were in essence leading him on, I think, right?
Oh yeah, I needed someone to talk to. So, of course, and I was a very meek woman. I was a people pleaser and I was very agreeable. So, for me, it was him saying, if you ever need a place to go, my place is available. If you ever needed somewhere to stay, I could absolutely help you. And, there was this like wanted to become my savior kind of complex with him. And that to me, of course, was very enticing, but I wasn't ever going to follow through with it. It was more like I didn't know how to keep him in check and I didn't know how to put him in place. And frankly, excuse my language, but I didn't know how to be a bitch back then. Thank God I went to prison and I've learned a thing or two now, but I didn't know how to turn down men. Like, that wasn't something I was very good at. So I was really easy prey for him for that.
And then let's go back for just a second. Where are things at with Keith? Are you guys, sorry to be, were you guys sexually active at this point? Are you guys emotionally connected? Like, lead me up to the day before this abduction happens. Tell me what your relationship was actually like.
So prior to the abduction. I was trying to get my husband to come home. There's, even they released the text messages from that day. I even tried to coax him with, coming home for lunch. And he blew me off. James was incredibly aggressive in the way that he was communicating that day, and it was making me very uncomfortable. And I wanted to delay and try and delay seeing James because he was really aggressive in the way that he was text messaging me. And so if I could get my husband to come home, then I could very simply text message James and say, sorry, my husband's home. I'm not able to come and meet up with you. And so I was doing everything that I could to try and eliminate what I felt was going to happen with James, which was his aggressive text messaging. And yeah, at that point, I would say our relationship was not good with Keith and I. Our marriage was not healthy. It was incredibly toxic. And
well, I mean, asking him to come home for lunch for sex, was that something you normally did? Was that something that would have been exciting for him? Or was that kind of the last straw of like, oh my God, he's paying me no attention. Okay, I'm going to go have lunch with James because he's now driven up all the way up here.
Sex wasn't a connection in my marriage. It was my marital duty.
Got it.
That kind of takes all the connection out of it, just in the way that I say it.
Got it. Okay. So, and then I think people really do need to understand that lead up because, again, listening to James, he makes it seem like this was very planned out. You guys bought, you guys had these burner phones, which meant you did have this. I mean, you're not saying you did not have this private communication. You did.
Yeah.
He's saying he was asked to come pick you up. You're saying you did or did not ask him. I mean, did you guys plan on having lunch in Reading that day?
Yes. So I knew that he was in town. There was an established meetup. So I was starting to eliminate and gradually break off our relationship. So there was a plan for him to come in town and to meet up, but it was going to be in a public place. It was going to be in a restaurant. It was not at the end of the dirt road. And what I had done is I had text messaged him during his aggressive text messages and said, dude, I'm going to go for a run. You need to wait. I just dropped the kids off at daycare. I'm going to go for a run. And when I get back, I'll hit you up. And I wish so much that the FBI could have found the burner phones. I think that there's such a missing piece of the evidence in this, because if they would have had access to the burner phones, they would have seen that established communication, and they would have seen that there was no plan to go to Southern California or to have him appear at the end of the dirt road. Because we had been in communication the entire time, and because he knew my running route, we'd been on the phone prior to that several times, he knew exactly where I was going to be. And him showing up was not part of the plan. And so it was incredibly shocking. We had a plan to meet up in town, not to meet up on the dirt road.
Okay. So at this point, like, listen, again, I'm taking pieces from Hulu documentaries and different documentaries, and like, I'm getting them all mixed up. The one thing I do remember is that there is a phone at the end of, I think it's your driveway, right? And it has hair in the ear pods, whatever. And it's just on the ground, placed, thrown, whatever. And I know from seeing your documentary, you don't remember what happened. What do you think happened?
I think that there could be a conclusion either way. I think it's likely that I didn't agree to get in the car. And I also think that it's likely that I could have gotten in the car. I wish, I've been through everything. I've done hypnosis and EMDR and therapy and like guided meditation. I've done everything to try and access that memory. I can tell you with certainty, there was no agreement to go to Southern California. Whether or not I would have gotten in the car or not is it's plausible either way. And I'd never denied that ever. I'm not trying to cover up that detail in any way. I'm simply saying I would not have gone to Southern California. There was no plan to go to Southern California. And the fact that I was drugged on the way to Southern California would demonstrate that there's no consent, very simply.
Why do you think you don't remember that?
I don't know. I think, talking to my dad about his car accident that he got into, because we had that father-daughter conversation of trying to find that as well. And he has missing fragments of that also. Going through that personal experience, it's kind of like when you go under anesthesia, right? In a surgery, there's just things that you don't remember, regardless of how hard you try to seek it. That's really the best way that I can describe it, is it's just not there. I remember.
So it's plausible. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so it's possible that he showed up at the end of the driveway, although he swears he doesn't know your address, and you said hi, and you said, "Oh my God."
It wasn't at the end of the driveway. It was the end of so I had a mile long, like, route. So it was at the end of like the road, not the driveway. Sorry to correct you there.
No, I want you to correct me. So wherever this phone was found,
Sure.
So it's possible that he sees you, you run into him, maybe you're calling him, talking to him, he picks you up, and then things change as you get into the car, and he says, "I'm taking you with me. Fuck this. We're gone. I don't, like, now you're with me." I mean, who knows what was said, but it is possible. But what you are saying is you do not remember asking him to come pick you up, planning on, this is the last time I'm going to see my family, and go. I mean, there wasn't some big goodbye.
That was not a conversation. No.
And there was no big goodbye with your kids that morning.
No, it was very normal. I just dropped them off at daycare and went home because there was no plan. There was no plan to leave Southern California and leave my children at daycare. I would never leave my children behind. I would never do that. So there wasn't, Keith didn't even know that they were left at daycare.
Right. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing that stands out. I'm a mother. I saw you have dogs, or you had a dog. I don't know what the dog is now. Who has the dog, by the way? I was thinking that.
Keith has the dog. I've asked him to give it back, but he won't.
The dog's alive. I just wanted to. Okay, that big, beautiful dog. Okay. I have 3 dogs and I have a daughter. And I'm watching your stuff and I'm thinking, if I was planning my exit, I would have to have a way to, I would say goodbye. I would hug them harder. I would have to plan on who was taking care of the dogs. I would make this plan. There would be something that was different because it would be too hard. And that doesn't seem like it happened that day.
Well, not only that, but you're a beautiful woman, right? So when you think about going out on a date with a boy, you wouldn't be in a sports bra, unwashed and on a run in jogging attire. You would be wearing makeup. You would be done up. You would have this whole, thing. I was planning on going out to lunch with him. There was no plan to meet him at the end of the dirt road. So, and I didn't abandon my children at daycare. There was no plan to leave my children at a daycare center. Law enforcement even goes to great lengths to say she left her wallet. She left her money. There's no indication that there was any money missing. There's just no clues that would lead one to conclude that that's what happened.
Right. Okay. So now, if you don't mind, let's talk about the captivity. It's 23 days.
22 days.
22 days. What do you remember from that time?
There's very little that I don't remember. There's very few times that I was drugged enough that I feel like I lost time. The disorientation of it was so difficult. Oftentimes I didn't know whether it was night or it was day. There was boards on the windows and it was really hard to kind of establish and get grounded in the time of day that it was. I was chained to a wall. There was a bucket in a closet that I used as a bathroom. He would regularly leave me all day when he went to work. He would put music outside the door and leave me chained to the wall all day. And it's the way that our prison system is set up now. They don't do solitary confinement like that anymore because of the mental anguish that just solitary confinement does to an individual, layered on top of being drugged the entire time during captivity and being starved by him and having my body mutilated and abused in the way that it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was horrifying. And to watch this documentary where my husband says that my PTSD is just all of a sudden made up, Do you, I wish that I could just erase what happened to my body. I still have scars everywhere. Like, it would be so much easier to just wake up and say, oh, yeah, it was all fake. I sleep great. I have no PTSD. You know, it's infuriating to be reduced by these people that say that I did this to myself. I couldn't even consider doing these injuries to myself.
Do you have a history of self-harming at all?
No, no. Keith Papini tries to say that in his documentary, but there's absolutely no proof of that.
Ladies, let's be real. If you've been feeling exhausted for no reason, bloated after every meal, snapping at people you love, or just staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering what the hell is wrong with me, this might shock you, but it could be your hormones. We're taught to blame everything on stress, aging, our gut, but for women, it starts with our hormones. And when they're out of balance, everything is off. Enter Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth, a groundbreaking supplement created by an award-winning nutrition scientist designed specifically for women like us. It naturally supports your estrogen, cortisol, insulin, and thyroid levels without synthetic hormones or Band-Aid solutions. The results? Women report fewer mood swings, no more energy crashes, better sleep, improved digestion, and that bloating, it's gone. It's not magic. It's your body finally working with you, not against you. For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use code understood at checkout. Again, that's happymammoth.com and the code understood for 15% off. Also, check our show notes for the link. Your hormones might be off, but your solution doesn't have to be. I want to get into your background and your family in a minute, but I just want to stay where we are. And I'm really sorry that I've made you cry because I don't want to bring you back there, but I do because I feel like people don't get it. And I don't know if I get it. So I just genuinely, if it's okay, want to keep going with these questions.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me because, again, as I've listened just today to James Reyes, his whole conversation and him saying what happened, you know, for people listening that don't know, this is a guy who does not sound that intelligent, cannot put two sentences together, and you have to pull teeth to get anything out of him. But what he says is, I was helping a friend. A friend called. I didn't ask a lot of questions. She said she needed me to come. I was at work. I didn't pay attention. I don't know if there was a burner phone. She had a burner phone. I don't know about my burner phone. I just turned off my phone, and then I went to get her. And then we turn into finding out that he branded you, and he admits he branded you. You know, not for anything. Somebody asked me to drive 8 hours to get them and drive back. I'm like, fuck you, get an Uber. Like no, I'm not doing that. Somebody asked me to brand them on top of that. It's like, what are you, crazy? I don't understand the fact that he and law enforcement are saying that you coerced him to do it, because no one has really forced that questioning of like, but what kind of a person says yes to this? What kind of a person says, yeah, this is a good idea? And he admits he didn't really ask you about your home life. You know, if he's going to agree to do all these things, you would think common sense would be, but there was a really good reason. And the only reason I could come up in my head that might have made sense is he thought you guys were going to have a relationship. You guys went down to try and make it work. You realized you missed your kids. You realized you weren't getting away with this. You were like, I can't tell him I was with you, so I'm going to have to fake that I was abducted, and let's like get a couple injuries on me. It's going over the top to say, dude, do me a favor, brand me. Do me a favor, punch me, give me a rash on my arm, burn my arm, starve me. And by the way, I'm sorry I'm talking so much because I told you I wasn't going to do this. The weight thing is something that I don't understand.
Yeah.
People talk about how hard it is to lose weight all the time. Ozempic is a big thing in our country. Everybody wants to get stabbed by the shot to get Ozempic to lose a couple pounds. How much weight did you lose while you were gone?
So I was 107, and after captivity, I was 87 pounds. So you kind of see in these photographs, right, that you can see all of my bones. It's hard for me to lose weight because I'm already a thin person.
Okay.
Like
I just want to stop you there because I think this is a very important thing. And to me, I know this sounds crazy. To everyone listening, don't give me hate about this. How many times have we all been like, I need to lose 5 pounds to go to a wedding, to go to a thing, to go on a date, whatever, and we can't do it. So maybe you get Ozempic, maybe you try and starve yourself. To lose 20 pounds in 22 days is almost impossible on your own, being like, I'm going to be this tough that I'm going to starve myself. It's almost impossible unless someone else is forcing you to do it. So for me, whether or not I believe you, that is one reason where I'm like, there's no way she could have done that on her own.
Yeah.
In a way that made sense, because we're all trying to lose weight. My fiance is talking about, getting insurance and stuff. And he's talking about why he can't lose the last 3 pounds. And you were away for 20 days and lost 20 pounds. I mean, it's not something you can do on your own, because this guy goes to work and you're just on some burner phone looking at how famous you've gotten. It makes no sense. So explain, are you in and out of consciousness all day? Are you awake all 22 days and you're miserable and bored and starving and wondering if someone's going to save you? Tell me, bring me into that room with you.
It was 22 days of absolute hell and torture. I mean, James, it has a proclivity for violence, and he gets off on pain. And so it was like the torture that happened to my body and the injuries that occurred, it's what got him off. So it was like I was his little plaything that he chained to a wall and did whatever he wanted to. And he kept me drugged the entire time, and then manipulated the process so that he could brainwash me to get me to understand that if I did what he wanted, he would let me off the chain, and then I would get to eat, and I would get water, and I would get to use the bathroom. So it was like he set me up the entire time of like, if you just do this thing, then I'll get off. And then he would go to sleep. And so it was like participating in all of these vile acts that I had to do to survive during captivity, and then to be reduced by law enforcement like I asked for it in some way. It's horrifying. And it's like he admits on his interrogation tapes that he did it. Mm-hmm. He says that he did it. And they're injuries that I couldn't possibly do myself. He's just getting away with it because he said I wanted it. And that's never been a part of my psychological profile, ever. And trust me, if it was, it would have came out already. Like, right. That's no part of my life. It's never been a part of my life. And the hell and the brutality that I lived to just be reduced to, well, she asked for it. It was absolutely horrific.
He says that he left you all day and you were just on a phone. Were you on a phone? What did you do all day?
No, he would come home and tell me about things, and he would tell me about the news coverage, but no, the majority of the time I was chained to a wall on a mattress on the ground.
With nothing to do. No books. He says you were reading all day.
No.
It was like solitary confinement. You have nothing to do. You're going crazy, hoping possibly that your husband is figuring this out and coming to save you.
Yeah.
Did you hold hope that would happen?
I mean, every day I was hopeful, but what kept me going was getting home to my children.
Right.
Every time I opened my eyes, I felt lucky to be alive. After captivity, I was grateful for even having the sensation of running water for such a long time. But it was just like, if I could just make it through one more minute, if I could just go another 30 seconds, if I could go one more minute, then I'm closer to getting home. And I knew I was making progress with him. I knew that I was in the negotiation phases with him because I was doing everything that he wanted, and I was establishing that trust. If I could make him believe that I was doing what he wanted, then I would get somewhere with him, And I think the fact that it blew up in the media was really scary, not just for him, but for his family as well. His family was there. And I think once that hostage negotiator got involved, I think it became very real that he was being hunted. And I used that in every way that I could.
What do you mean by that? I don't know. What do you mean a hostage negotiator?
A hostage negotiator was employed by Keith. So this guy named Cameron Gamble was hired to to create a hostage negotiation and create a phone number that the person that held me captive could call for my release and be rewarded with a certain amount of money. And his family was arguing with him about it, and everyone that was involved was arguing with him about it. I could hear bits and pieces of conversation, as well as James was talking about it as well. And for me, it was like that out, right? If I could convince him to just let me go, then the media would die down and then it would all be over. I assured him that I would never reveal his identity. I was too afraid to tell my husband anyway, and that was part of the negotiation as well. And so I really do believe
to be clear, you were only fearful to tell your husband because he would think that you asked for this. He would think you were having an affair and this would be consensual regardless.
Yeah, and Keith knew where I was the entire time. I really truly believe that Keith knew where I was the entire time. He told investigators that James was a primary suspect very early on. It was maybe like 4 or 5 days into the investigation that he said that James was a primary suspect. In his documentary, he does this weird thing where he hints at they went and staked out his house and then were called off or something like that. It makes absolutely no sense. And also, if you knew that I was there, why didn't you say that? And if you knew that James was a primary suspect and you're saying that you staked out his house, why didn't you go inside to find me chained to a wall? That part of it doesn't make any sense. And to me, I feel it's just an out and out lie.
Right. I did see that. And I did see I guess it was a private investigator or somebody who had said, we were there for a while and then we were told that he was no longer a suspect and we left. I did hear from James Reyes himself in this interrogation that there are people in his family that knew that you were at his house. Yeah. But he said they never came into the house. Did you ever hear voices when you were in the other room? Did you ever think someone was in the house with you?
He's lying.
What do you mean?
He's lying. They'd come into the house on more than one occasion.
Did you ever see anyone?
Mm-hmm.
You saw people there?
Yeah.
They saw you?
Briefly. There was a sexual incident that occurred with one of the people that was watching me.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I'm still pretty scared, frankly, about talking about everything. There's no charges that have been made. And so,
let's stop right there because I want to say one thing to you, Sherri. There's no reason for you to be scared anymore. You have already had to serve time. You've already come out of this. You already are now no longer with your husband. There's no reason for you to be scared. The only thing that you should be doing, if this is true, and you say it's true, and I want to believe that it's true, is for you to be able, especially in a situation like this, if you're saying somebody saw something, is to be able to talk about something, because the thing that you're missing in your story is the corroboration, right? Is someone to say, okay, fine. Yeah, I knew it. I knew it was happening. I saw that it was happening. Because once you get that, it makes it impossible for him to say it didn't happen, the way that you're saying. And I'm not pushing you to say anything, but I just want you to know that you are your own person, and you did not grow up like me. I get it. I am more like balls to the wall, like, fuck everyone. I'm going to blow everyone's life up. I can see that you are much more calm, cool, and collect than me. But I also want to tell you, there are people that at this point now will protect you. I know 2 of them. You know the same 2. And you need to start saying the things that you know, because you have protected the wrong people for a long time. So let's go back to that question for a second. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But if there were people in the house and you say somebody saw you, can you talk about that a little bit?
I was very drugged up that day. It was difficult to move my body at all. I could flutter my eyes open just slightly, but I was more focused on trying to get my chest to expand to breathe. I was chained to the wall and was undressed, and his cousin was masturbating in the corner.
Wow. So
they were there. They witnessed it. His mom knew what was going on.
And what they witnessed, though, is the account of you being chained, of you not being participating.
They all knew. They all knew, they saw the boards on the windows as well. They saw the chain in the closet. They knew what was going on. They knew that I was high and drugged and starving. They weren't there when James was doing things to my body, but they knew. I mean, you saw the pictures. I was black and blue from head to toe.
I saw the pictures, but what would you say to people that say, and they believe James or the police who narrated that story, you inflicted those. You asked him to inflict those. He admits in his interrogation, he inflicted that, but he's like, she asked me to, so I just did it. Which, by the way, I was saying to my producer, George, I should be an interrogator because those interrogators were they just let those answers go right by and they were like, oh, okay. I didn't get that. If someone is saying, go ahead and, did you brand her? Yeah, because she asked me. They just moved on to the next question. What? Yeah. What? So explain.
Well, there's so much ego involved in this. There is so much ego in law enforcement because the minute they knew I was lying, they knew they messed up. They knew that there was holes in their interrogation and they were very angry. This is my presumption. I don't know for sure, but I would presume that these big law enforcement officers had a lot of ego wrapped up in this case. And when you find out that someone has deceived you, when you attach to that ego piece to it, that's what you're fixating on. And I think for me, there was 6 years of building an investigation against me and an hour of listening to James' interrogation. And frankly, I didn't give them any other options. I mean, there's this accountability piece for me. I didn't tell them. So when they came back, knowing what happened with James, had I just had that moment of bravery to say, no, it was James Reyes, they may have went back and got him. They may have went back and thoroughly investigated it, but I didn't give them that option because I was just too scared, which frankly is very normal for victims of abuse and very normal for victims of sexual assault. It takes a long time to come forward.
And again, to clarify for people that are not understanding, you were scared because he had threatened you, but also you were scared because of what your husband might do if he left you, correct?
Well, yes, and I'd already established lying to law enforcement officers, and I had no idea what I was up against. I didn't know that I was going to go to prison in that moment. I didn't know what my charges were going to be like. I knew that I was already lying, and I didn't know how to get out of it. So to me, just saying nothing was better than facing everyone that was there to just obliterate me. There was no safety in that. And,
so what do we think?
I wish that I would have given them that because I think that they would have gone back and gone after James, but I didn't give it to them.
Yeah. I mean, I think, listen, if I know that there is this thought that maybe the police department is in a conspiracy and is out to get you because they're friends with Keith, and maybe not. I mean, listen, we've all been watching the Karen Reed trial. We all believe in Boston there is a conspiracy going on with the police department. So it's not unheard of that there could be some conspiracy. What I will say from spending hours listening to these tapes, I don't know if there's as much as a conspiracy is that as there is, they didn't get any information from you. And because you lied about the Hispanic women, because you didn't come forward in those couple of years in the meantime and say, knock, knock, by the way, stop looking for these people because it's really this guy and I don't want my husband to know. And, let me just tell you, because they didn't have that to go on, I think at that point, and I hear it when they're talking to James. Well, she hasn't accused you of a crime, and we're going to go back to her and now tell her we found your DNA. So did you do it because she asked you, or is she going to say a different story? And I know people are going to think that they led him and coerced him to kind of give him an alibi. At the same time, maybe, for sure. But maybe they also are only working with the fact that you never said it was him. So for them, they're like, well, maybe this is a consensual thing because, it seems so odd that she wouldn't just tell us that it was him. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that it's the piece that there's a lot of things that they missed, frankly. And the first and foremost, the piece that they missed is that I was just terrified of my husband. I
Yeah.
mean, sitting right in front of them. And that's just how interrogation is. You know, if you have any domestic abuse survivor that you've spoken to ever that's had law enforcement called to interrogate them, it's a very sticky situation because they interrogations are not set up to help the victims. They're to catch a criminal.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I suffered the same interrogation tactics that they would do with other domestic abuse survivors that don't give up what's happening at home because they're just too afraid. And for Keith, you know, there's this theory that I asked for him to be there. I was coached and prepped to say, I can't be in this interview without my husband, which you see very quickly in the very first interrogation he has with law enforcement, where he needs to know everything every step of the way. He has to be in control of the investigation every step of the way. So it was like leading into these interrogations with law enforcement, Keith Papini would say, I need you to tell them that you need me to be in the room the entire time. So I would say, I need my husband to be in the room the entire time. So law enforcement comes back and says, well, she asked Keith to be there the entire time. Yeah, because I was coached to say that. I had to say that because if I didn't say that, not only would I be thoroughly interrogated by Keith Papini later, but I would suffer the consequences and the punishment of not having him there. So he had to be involved in every interrogation, which meant having him right next to me. And to have a private secret call with law enforcement, the manner in which I was in lockdown after captivity was far more extensive than it was prior to captivity. I didn't
What
even
do you
have
mean?
access to my bank account, let alone access to my car keys or access to social media or email or anything like that that wasn't completely thoroughly controlled by Keith Papini.
So I want to get back to how you got out in a second, but while you're talking about this, you know, then we go into COVID eventually, and like, you know, but the point is you remained out of the spotlight for many years, and you stayed with your husband. What was your relationship like then? Did all of a sudden he start to trust you, and you went back to being a romantic couple? Like, what happened?
No, my primary focus was the kids. And so when COVID happened, I was homeschooling my children, which I loved. It was just the best. They're the best part of life for me. And being able to educate my children during COVID was an extraordinary experience. But in terms of Keith, we were just slowly growing further and further apart. And frankly, his hate for me was getting worse and worse, and the way that he treated me was worse and worse. And I was just disappearing as a person. I mean, it was so sad to start getting into this investigation with my current lawyer and look at this timeline of photographs of where you see this beautiful, confident woman who, you know, dresses in a very confident way. And you see this progression of me getting into like just wearing baggy men's clothing and just completely dissolving as a human being and being as washed out and unhealthy and meek. And it's really, really sad to watch. And now I'm healthier than I've ever been and more vibrant than I've ever been and have an opportunity for authenticity and to be who I am. And I really, as destructive as my life became, I am the happiest that I've ever been. I miss my children, and when I get them back, I will be completely whole. But my life is good now.
I'm very happy that your life is good. I want to go back just so we don't overstep it. How did you get out?
Okay, so this is an interesting part of the timeline. So when the FBI was investigating my case, they had cut off my access to therapy. So part of my restitution is the compensation for victims' assistance that paid for my therapy, right? Mm-hmm. So when they decided that I was going to be a suspect and not a victim, they cut off the access to therapy that I was desperate for. Therapy was the only place that I had the freedom to just drive to without his permission, that I could freely go to. And so I was getting really sad and really hurt by not having access to therapy because Keith again, had control of the finances, and he wasn't a fan of paying for therapy. So I was just cut off and access to mental health. So his sister, Suzanne Papini, granted me access to therapy and said, I have a therapist. His name is Dr. Diggs, who is in my film. And I want you to maybe do a couple of Zoom sessions and see if you can establish therapy with him. And so I was secretly seeing this new therapist who was seeing me pro bono in the very beginning. And in fact, I had a Zoom session going. I had shut the sliding glass door in my studio where I was teaching my children, and I had it locked. I didn't know that Keith was still home. I thought he'd already left for work. I could see the kids playing in the yard in the front, but I didn't want them privy to the conversation that I was having, so I had locked the door. Keith tries the door and he can see that it's locked, and he is like practically breaking the door down. He's cussing and swearing and screaming at me, but what he doesn't know is that I have the laptop open, and so his sister and the therapist are listening to the way that he's screaming and yelling at me and trying to bust his way through the door. And then when he found out that I had this secret established new therapist, it became completely unacceptable. I wasn't allowed to see anyone that he hadn't vetted and been present in therapy or had any type of control over. And so I was secretly seeing Dr. Diggs, and Dr. Diggs was like, that's not okay. Like, I witnessed what's happening. It's in your best interest to try and figure out what your exit plan is here. So Dr. Diggs and I were already starting to establish an exit strategy and trying to figure out how I was going to move on with my life and get out of my marriage that I knew was no longer safe. And then I got arrested. So it was like I started this plan of like, where is my exit strategy and how am I going to break free of this person? And I got arrested. And then after my arrest, it was like everything fell apart from that in my marriage. And then after that, after I was released from prison on bail, I stayed with his sister, Suzanne. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, it was like the first time that I felt really safe, and I had the safety to talk about what actually happened and start to tell the truth about what happened. And then this huge incident occurred. My defense attorney gave Keith a little bit that I had been concealing, which was the burner phones, and he didn't mean to. So he called me directly, Bill Portnova, my federal attorney, and he said, I'm so sorry. I let out a bit of information Keith didn't know before. He is extremely upset. I need you to be safe and I need you to be careful, but he's on his way to you. I don't know what's going to happen, but he is pissed. So out of my safety and concern, I hit record on my phone and I slid it under the bed. And then Keith proceeded to try and get me to coerce me into a very unfair agreement, giving away all of my rights, not just to my children, but to all of the assets. And when it came time to tell my story, he would have complete control over it. And if I would have signed that, then I would have been able to go home. So Keith literally said, before I signed the plea agreement, we're going to get a divorce so that I can protect our assets. But if you sign this contract, you can come home and you can have access to your children. And I'll let you live in the house until I've decided that I forgive you and you've apologized to me enough and you've thoroughly apologized to me enough that I feel like you're worthy enough to have the right to join me in the bedroom. And I said no, and I wouldn't sign it. And then following directly after that, you see this very public divorce where Keith Papini has a completely different perspective and retaliatory false allegations that happen. And if I would have just signed this contract, Rachel, I'd be home right now. I'd have access to my children. I'd have access to everything that I had rights over. I mean, like I would literally be able to see my kids, but I was done with him having control over everything and chose to go to prison instead. And if I would have just signed the contract, I'd have my children.
Okay, well, let's not feel bad that you didn't sign the contract because that contract sucked and you're going to get through this and this is going to be fine. So couple questions. What is the legal, what does the law say about you having your kids right now?
Well, so to go through the custody modification, obviously he got rights to the children, both legal and physical, because I went to prison. My children have never been taken from me. They've never been removed by the courts or anything
And
like
is
that.
is that, because I know this well, is this a temporary situation or he has full custody permanent?
No, no, he was established. He had established legal and physical custody because I was incarcerated. It makes absolutely legal sense to grant him full legal, full physical custody. But it was on the modification to have a change in circumstance. So my change in circumstance is that I'm out of prison. Keith Papini is incredibly good at manipulating the court system to cause delays. So every time we've had a little bit of forward movement, he'll delay and pull back. And every time there's a little more forward movement, he'll delay and pull back. And so that's just where we're at. The first portion of my trial for the modification of our custody happened last month, and the conclusion of that trial has been postponed until August. And then in August, the judge is able to make a ruling and a modification to the custody agreement.
Okay. And when was the last time you saw your kids?
I just saw them.
Okay, good. So you are able to see them once in a while. Is it under supervision?
I see them once a month under supervised visitation. And, there's this very big misconception on why I have supervised visitation. And I appreciate you allowing me to have this clarification on it. When Keith and I split up prior to my incarceration, he was the supervisor. So he was supervising my children because he had them. So he took possession of the kids and he was in charge of allowing me to see them whenever he decided that I would be allowed to see them. What that means is it means that he was following me into the bathroom. He was watching me undress. He was putting me in very uncomfortable situations. And so I went.
For what reason? You're not a drug addict. You're not what's the issue?
Because he wanted to get his way. He wanted to get his way, and he wanted an opportunity to say, if you don't do what I want, I'm ending this visit, because he was the acting supervisor. I was done with that, and it was infuriating that he had all of this demonstrated control. And so I went to the courts and I said, I can't do this anymore. I don't want Keith Papini as my supervisor. I don't want my ex-husband as acting supervisor in order to see my children. Yeah. So the only thing that the courts could suggest is professional supervised visitation, because Keith was in possession of the children and it was already established that I was going to prison and so we didn't have the opportunity to make a modification. And so it was recommended that if I wanted to see my children to have a supervisor present. So I recommended that so that Keith wouldn't be there. And so I wouldn't continue to suffer the abuse that I endured while seeing my children. And now I'm stuck. I don't need supervised visitation, and there's nothing indicating that I need supervised visitation, but there won't be a modification until the conclusion of the trial. So the judges asked for him to change. The judges asked for him to try and make some kind of reunification therapy or see the kids more often or have a non-professional supervisor. And Keith Papini just keeps saying, no, absolutely not.
That won't work in his favor, because listen, I've been through family court, which by the way is the biggest scam in the country. But I've been through that, and courts do not like parents alienating another parent. So let them do it till August, and hopefully you have a really good lawyer who will just show all this. And it's not like you're a drug user. It's not like, but by the way, even if you were all these crazy things, like your kids need their mother and should be able to see you, and you are not a harm to your kids just because your ex-husband doesn't, wants to punish you. I'm hopeful that the court will see that and grant you what most parents should have, which is 50-50. I mean, it just should be the way it works out.
Absolutely. And I have a cousin, for example, who is the Shasta County Foster and Adopt Coordinator here in our county. And she told me all of these horrific stories of these kids that she gets in the foster and adopt program. Like just recently she had an infant that the mom wasn't feeding and it was starving to death. She got her custody back within a month and a half because she did what she had to do. Like it would be far easier if I was a drug addict to have gotten custody back of my children.
Well, it is so true that you say that. I've interviewed a couple people that have the conversation was about foster care and adoption, and the whole thing is that the courts, unfortunately or fortunately for these people that I was interviewing, their goal is to reunify. So
Right.
if your judge does not have that goal, that would be crazy. I don't care what kind of a manipulator Keith is. And by the way, I don't know that I should say this on air, but you have a really bad picker. You pick terrible men. Okay, girl.
No.
Keith,
I'm working on that.
You're scared of Keith. Keith is no one to be scared of. Okay, like legit. I mean, the fact that he has some power over you right now because he has your kids. When you get your kids back and you can establish you're not a harm to them, which clearly you're not, no matter what you lied about, didn't lie about, this has nothing really to do with your children. That guy is, I would caution anyone who's going to date him in the future because, like, what the hell? Like, a guy who wants to keep children from your mother is a terrible person, regardless of what you guys had going on in the past. And I know you have a lot to say about him. I'm not really going to let you say too much about him because I don't want you to get in trouble, number one. And number two, because I don't think you should say bad things about the father of your child, because I know you have a lot to say. But he may have manipulated you. He may have been a bad parent. He may manipulate the cops. The guy is not that powerful. And you can meet a lot more men who you should be with. And I'm not going to let you sit in this Keith Papini stuff because he's not even worth it. James, on the other hand, same thing. Total loser, Sherri, who you let convince you he was a good guy. You talk to him about God knows what, and you go off with him, trust him. Maybe you don't trust him and he gets you in the car, drugs you, whatever it is. Total fucking loser, Sherri. So, and then this new guy you dated after that everybody heard about for a little bit, the auto shop guy, whoever he was, fucking loser. Okay. Like, I don't know if you're on Bumble. I don't know if you're on Match.com. You have to let only a select people introduce you to your next boyfriend because clearly you are a pleaser. You pick people who you think are powerful. They are powerful in all the wrong ways. No? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Like, we've got to get you the right type of guy. But anyways, back to your children. I mean, I get it. It's very emotional. It's very difficult, but it's going to work out. That part is going to work out. One thing
I'm hopeful. I'm incredibly hopeful that there's going to be a modification.
It's more than hopeful. It has to be because you have done nothing to not deserve to be a parent. You are a great parent from everything. Again, and I've been very neutral. You are a good parent. So I'm hoping that will happen for you. But I want to go back for a second because we did skip over it. Just take me back to how you got released from James, because we all see you in some grainy video coming across the street, chained, shackled, whatever it was. And this seems very dramatic. And we all think it's these two Hispanic women that have let you go and you want to, protect this one Hispanic woman, blah, blah, blah. But how did it really work in real life? Like the day before, is he saying, okay, I'm going to let you go. It's Thanksgiving. I want to let you back with your kids. Are you begging to go home? Tell me the truth about what happened.
I'd been begging the entire time to go home. There was never a day that went by that I didn't try to infuse any conversation with, you need to let me go home, or I need to be back with my children, or any type of, like, every day I tried to find some way to negotiate to go home with this man. And frankly, there wasn't an established plan. I wish that there was. When I was dropped off and when he had me, like, forcefully pushed me out of the car, I had no idea where I was. I had no idea that I was in Yolo County and still hours away from my home. That portion of it still doesn't even make sense to me. Why not just take me home even closer to where I lived? I mean, it was hours away from my home community even. So I'm not sure, and there... In my documentary, you hear the FBI agents say, like, "Ooh, it's convenient that it's Thanksgiving Day." I had no idea that it was Thanksgiving Day. I didn't know until the EMT that had me in the ambulance told me that it was Thanksgiving Day. I'm not sure. I wish that there was more information about that. I just know that leading up to it, there was the hostage negotiator that he was in a conversation with. And that day, on Thanksgiving Day, it was a very difficult day. He was very rushy. He was very aggravated. He'd come in very swiftly. He'd started putting hose clamps on my ankles and binding me to the chain that was around my waist. And it was this very rushed ordeal. And in fact, he'd gotten me inside of a hockey bag. So I had to get inside a bag for him to take me outside. So my tiny little body was stuffed in a bag and put over his shoulder. And he carried me out to this vehicle and then went a certain distance and then refastened me in the vehicle. And I was very much under the influence and very high. And then I lost time. Like, I kept blacking out and I couldn't stay awake during the drive. I knew that I was fastened in the car, but there wasn't established communication for the actual release. I just know that he was getting nervous because of the media that was out there. And I used that as much as I could to establish some way to get out.
When you say hostage negotiator, because you mentioned a couple of times in this interview, and I haven't heard of that before, are you saying somebody was actually talking to him about potentially if he had you and letting you go?
No, it was on the news. So there was a hostage negotiator that they had gotten on the local news station and broadcasted like a reward for.
Got it. Okay, you said that before, but I didn't know if you meant he was nervous because he was talking to them. Okay,
right.
So, when you were in the car, did you realize you were going home?
No, I kind of had an indication of that. So yes and no. I thought that that's what was going on, but I didn't really know for sure, but it was terrifying. It was especially terrifying because like I didn't know what he was doing, especially when he was like attaching those hose clamps to my ankles. I didn't quite understand why he did that. I didn't know why I was being put in a bag. I was just really scared. So to me, it could have been one thing or the other. It could have been the end to my life, or it could have been my salvation. For me, the whole thing was really terrifying and emotional, and I was frozen. I mean, I was really scared.
What did you think about the whole time that you were there? Like, were you like, oh my God, I love my husband so much, I miss him? Were you like, what were your thoughts?
Fear, mostly. I mean, just trying to stay alive. I knew that Keith was never going to stop looking for me. I don't think it's for the same reason that most people think. But for me, I was just fixated on if I can survive this, I can get back to my kids.
Got it. Okay.
I just miss the kids. I just wanted to get home to my family.
Of course. And quick question. You mentioned how you felt drugged most of the time. Would he actually give you a pill?
There was multiple things. So there was a drink. There was something in some kind of concocted drink. And there was also something that he would put in the food. So I could tell there was like a grainy texture to the food. And other times he would just freely give it to me. And so there's a lot of missing information when it comes to my case. We've tried FOIA requests. We've had lawyers try to get information. And there are things that law enforcement are just not giving us access to. I don't have my rape kit results. I don't have my drug results. They said that there was drugs found in my system, and I could hear law enforcement speaking in the hospital, but they haven't given us those drug results. And we don't know why. We don't understand why they're not giving me my medical information and my medical results from examinations during the investigation.
But when you say you don't know why, like how, literally why? Like, aren't they only supposed to give it to you?
They're supposed to. Yes.
So you have a lawyer working on this still?
Yeah, there's been an indication from the FBI that the FOIA request is going to cost thousands of dollars and at least 2 to 3 years for them to give any information. So we've put in for everything, but even what we've asked them for, there's a lot of missing files in it, and there's a lot of information that should be in there that is not.
And what would be the explanation for that?
There is none. They don't answer that question. They never have. We've directly asked them that question. They have never answered that question.
Your husband has suggested that your childhood plays a part in some of your history or what's gone on, or the fact that maybe you're a runaway, or all these things. What can you talk about your childhood a little bit?
Yeah, I think that there is a confirmation bias that's happening in terms of my childhood trauma, or just me as a defiant teenager in general. So when I was in school, I was a straight A student. I did every sport under the sun. I did every extracurricular activity, but I was kind of a defiant child, and for someone to conclude that I was a runaway, I wasn't. It was like my parents just said, no, you can't go out and go to the movies. And I'd say, yeah, I'm going anyway. And for me, all that does is it's like it just continues to establish that I had a personality disorder that was established that I could live a secret life, right? So if someone wanted me to be one thing, I would defiantly say, no, I'm going to do it anyway. That's who I want to be. And unfortunately, it's those at-risk teens that live kind of this defiant life that are put at the most risk for predators. I have a really good friend of mine who was suffering from trauma in her childhood, similarly in the way that I was. And that's how she was sex trafficked. She was hospitalized after an attempted suicide, and her captor found an open door and was able to sex traffic her for a number of years. So there's like this established history that they're using as confirmation bias to conclude one thing that's actually the exact opposite. And all it demonstrates is that I have the capability of keeping quite a lot of secrets, which leaves you open to predators. I mean, it's one of the simplest ways. It's what groomers look for. It's what predators look for. They look for people that are easily capable of keeping secrets from people. And I definitely, certainly was one of those.
Another thing I want to really understand, because I think this is part of some people's issue, is that you get to the point where you're arrested. They give you, hello? Do we lose her?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Okay. We had a little screen issue there. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. We get to the point where people, are wondering why you would take a plea deal, why you would go to prison, and why at that point you wouldn't say, okay, everybody stop. I didn't lie about this. Why would you again agree or say in prison, okay, fine, I lied. I'll take the prison time.
So first and foremost, when I was arrested and my case was created by the FBI, it was Sherri Papini versus the United States federal government. If I would have gotten a trial, Sherri Papini versus James Reyes, that would have been a very different trial. That would have been a very different option for me. But that's not what I had. It was Sherri Papini versus the United States federal government, and the feds don't lose. You don't beat the feds. So not only was I up against the entire United States federal government, but they make trials go on forever. They can drain you of all of your assets. They can, like I just said, they can choose not to give you access to all of the information. They can choose not to get, like I don't have access to my rape kit results. I don't have access to the drugs that were in my system. You can't beat a game that's already rigged. Mm-hmm. You don't beat the federal government. So for me, not only did I know that I was up against the entire United States of America, but I wanted to take accountability. I knew that lying and concealing his identity was wrong. I knew that not giving the law enforcement an opportunity to actually thoroughly investigate James Reyes was wrong. And at the end of a trial that I would have against the United States federal government, at the end of that trial, I still lied. So I was still going to face time, and I was still going to face an even harsher sentence. And I didn't have money. I didn't have resources. I didn't have the access that I have now and the confidence that I have now to stand up for myself in that way. And frankly, to me, the demonstration of my remorse was taking accountability for the lie that I created. And so taking the plea agreement was my best option.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, the lie about the two Hispanic women. Is
the lie about my captor's identity. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And those two Hispanic women are real people. They were people, like if you were to hold up the picture of James's mother next to that sketch, they're identical. So I was trying to breadcrumb law enforcement to get to James. It was never about trying to establish these completely new identities of these fake made up people. They're real people that were involved in this crime. I just couldn't say James Reyes. So the breadcrumb was that James Reyes is Hispanic. So if I could lead them to his mother and this connection, I wouldn't be directly saying on camera that it is in fact James Reyes.
And by the way, for people listening, I listened to the tape of James talking to the police, and he admits that his mother did know that you were at the house. Did you ever see the mother?
No, there was a time where I heard someone that I think could have been considered his mother, but no, I was in the bedroom with the door locked when he had other people.
Well, he does admit that his mother knew that you were there, which to me also is so crazy that these people are not held accountable. And if you were arrested for lying at all, I just don't understand why he wasn't. He spent in a 2.5 hour, 3 hour interview, he spent a full hour lying to the cops that were there, and they kept repeating it is a crime to lie, and he kept doing it. And then, as we all know, you're not going to just completely come clean. Whatever he was saying may have been a portion of the truth, but it was not all of the truth, and it was very uncomfortable to listen to. And it was uncomfortable to listen to these the law enforcement who were talking to him and just kind of letting him say whatever he wanted to say and then moving on to the next subject. I will say that in your benefit.
Thank you. And when I was in prison, I met women that were in there for conspiracy charges. And conspiracy could be something as simple as a drug deal is going down and you're a passenger in a car. And they got like 5 and 6 years for a conspiracy charge or for impeding an investigation. So there's real charges that could have been established regardless of what side of the street that you're on, regardless of whether you actually believe that I did it to myself, which is still absurd, or believed that he was involved. There should have been at minimum a conspiracy charge or impeding an investigation. And at minimum, that didn't even happen. And he's not even responsible for any portion of the restitution. I am the only person that's paying a portion of the restitution. And there's several other people that knew what was happening and knew the entire time and are still not responsible. I am paying the entire bill for the entire investigation.
Yeah. Listen,
and
I mean, go ahead.
And I spent 18, my sentence was for 18 months. The FBI was only asking for 8 months. Our prosecution was only asking for 7 months, and the judge gave me 18.
I mean, listen, again, there are many things that are very questionable. And I think people want to reduce this to a headline of you created a hoax, you lied because you didn't want to be with your husband, or you were possibly in love with someone else, and then you faked this abduction to be able to come home and save face. There are a lot of questions. I mean, if he wasn't involved, I don't know why there would be some situations that were very clear on there. I don't know why he wouldn't have been arrested or given some sort of slap on the wrist for his involvement in it. I don't know how anyone could believe that he would just do all these abusive things to a girl just because she asks him to do it for what he says is, by the way, no pussy, right? I mean, some guys might laugh and be like, oh, men do a lot of crazy things to be with a woman. He claims that you guys were not together sexually. You don't say that that's the case, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say that there was sexual intercourse, but there was quite a lot of sexual instances. So, like I said, James would get off with the violence that he would create with my body. And so there was sexual incidences that occurred, but I kept him out of me, out of ejaculating inside of me, because I did not want to get pregnant. So I did whatever I could do to keep him out. And that means he would participate in these vile, very violent acts to my body. And then he would just go to sleep and he would leave me alone.
Right. Did he actually sleep in the other room, or he slept in the same room as you?
There was only one time that he slept in the same room as me. After that, he'd sleep on the couch, or he would sleep in his second bedroom that was there. And that's to say what I could remember. There was times that I was so drugged that I didn't remember. So there's a lot of unknowns for me in that situation.
Right. I mean, again, another thing that I think is shocking, the boards on the window. I don't know how he can pretend that, like, if someone asked me, if I was doing a friend a favor and bringing you into my house because you were in a bad relationship, and you say, you got to put boards all over the window because I want to sit in the dark and chain myself to a wall, that makes no sense. I don't understand why cops didn't get more into that. I don't understand why cops didn't get into more of him admitting that a lot of people knew that you were there. I don't understand why, when we know a couple of days in that your ex-husband, that Keith was saying that you were talking to James within, the last couple of months, or he had caught you talking to James. There are a lot of unanswered questions. And I do think that the cops, whether or not they're mad at you for just lying about the Hispanic women portion of it, to save face or whatever the reason that they want to make up that you did or didn't do it. Yes, you lied. Yes, you should take responsibility for that. Okay. But that doesn't mean that there is truth to the situation. And I think that's what people are really missing in this piece. So, okay. So to get to this, so why are you writing the book now? Why are you talking now?
Well, there's been so many versions of the story, and there's been so many people running with my story about me without me. And even in the process of making a documentary, I'm still edited. It's still contextual in a documentary, and this is my voice. It's not just about me telling my side of the story. I'm reclaiming my life. I'm establishing that person that's been created to fit a narrative, it's not me. It's not really me. And this book is some of my biggest, most impactful moments in my life. And it's this tremendous journey that I've been on for self-discovery. And I think that my story has touched so many people, and there's so many people that can identify with bits and pieces of my story. And that's who I'm writing this book for those people that have been through the same situation as me, because what happened to me is preventable. And if I can help that in any way, if I can engage in a conversation with someone in some way that can prevent what happened to me, then I'm happy to do that. But this is really about me reclaiming my life. And that person, that Sherri Papini internet unicorn, she doesn't exist. And this is my words, reclaiming my story and my life, and using my ability to write this book.
Are you going to go back to your maiden name?
No, I'm actually, well, it is a maiden name, so I'm going to my mother's maiden name now. And my grandmother, that my daughter was named after, I'm taking hers.
Oh, good. Do we get to know what that name is, or are you going to go off?
Lewis. It's Lewis. Yeah.
Okay, Sherri Lewis.
Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts about how your children are going to be shaped to interact with you, think about you? Are you worried about that? I mean, I'll say for me, my daughter is 13. This year we had some issues with how kids got expelled for shaming her for something that happened with me, as you know, 15 years ago, and bringing it up in science class, going through all the pictures and then making fun of her for it. Do you worry about your kids, and if, I don't know, what other kids will say about you and put on them?
I'm so sorry that happened to you and your daughter.
Thank you.
How did you guys deal with that, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I mean, I had a conversation with the school, and I found myself in tears very quickly, being like, because I don't owe anybody any apologies at this point, right? Because it was between me and two other people, essentially. But I found myself saying, that, essentially my mistake shouldn't be something that my daughter has to pay for. And I will not allow her to be shamed for something that is on me, and something that, quite frankly, is the parents that are putting down on their kids, right? So, and I said to my daughter, Wyatt, you are so smart and so lucky, and you have access to me. And the thing is a lot of those people are almost fearful because they don't get to ask you the questions that I'm asking you now. They don't get to know what they want to know. And you trigger, just like I trigger, something in someone else's life, whether it is secrets, whether it is infidelity, whether it is, bad marriage, all these things, you and I and other people trigger that in others, and it creates fear. And what I ended up saying to my daughter is, you know me and I know you. And I am always going to tell you the truth. And, we are a team, and do not let anyone shame you because of something that they think I did, because you know me and you can ask me any question you want, but do not dare lower your head because you're embarrassed of something that you think I did. So, and she's a strong girl, and your kids will be strong. And as long as you get the time with them eventually for them to know you and not harp on the past, but know who you are, and know that they have access to you, and know you're never going away. I think probably the fear your kids have is that, let's say you get a boyfriend in the future, they don't know if you're going to, not be as accessible as you were when you were in their household. There are so many aspects of it, but that's how I dealt with it. I just said, you know me, and we are a team. And, I don't have a village fighting for me. I never did. I feel like you're the same with that. And you just have to create a really small village that trusts you and that allows your kids to know what a good person you are.
Yeah. I feel like I have that now. I have my mom and dad. The reason why I moved to where I'm at is to be closer to mom and dad. And my community has totally embraced me up here.
Right.
They've been incredibly supportive, and I have a lot of friends. And frankly, I have Suzanne, Keith Papini's sister, as well. We have a very established bond for the kids to have an open environment to ask questions and be able to have it's. I think right now, they have such limited access of me, and they have such limited access to actual information, like the real information. It's going to take some time for them, and it's going to take some unraveling of the alienation that I've experienced. And I look forward to doing that with a therapist. I look forward to having age appropriate conversations with my kids. But at this point, what is important and valuable to me is that they're seeing that I continue to show up, and I'm going to continue to show up. And I think right now, particularly my son, is struggling in school. And frankly, Keith exploited the hell out of my kids in his film. He really did. And to release videos, emotional videos of my kids in his film, my kid got bullied about it. And that's on him. That's something that he chose to do, to exploit my children in his film. I didn't do that in mine, and I've continued to try and mitigate the children's exposure in this. But I think really, as soon as I regain access to my kids and they see that I'm going to continue showing up, it's a much better, more confident message, especially for my daughter, because keeping secrets, it's not good. It's not what's best for your children, and not having the ability to speak and have your own voice, it's not what's best. And I know Keith Papini's personality, and I know what's happening, and I know that they're being very much coached and alienated away from me, and we're getting there. We're so close, and I've bonded. I have a really tight bond with my kids, so I know it's going to be okay. I just have to get them back.
Good. I'm really pulling for you, and I know that's going to happen. I don't even doubt that. Tell me a day in the life for you. Are you working? Are you hoping to work? What's going on?
Well, right now I'm on this book tour, so I'm promoting the book, and I'm trying to get out there as much as possible. And it's been a very daunting process, but it's been so incredible to not feel intimidated by the media anymore. So I was always very intimidated to engage, because I was always afraid, well, they're just going to spin it off and tell their own narrative anyway. And now I have this capacity to engage with them in a way that I'm just going to keep going. And I have an opportunity here because frankly, they're asking to speak to me. And I think everybody's always wanted to speak to me and always wanted to engage with me. And I was too fixated on keeping the secret. And now I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to say that I had an emotional affair. I'm not ashamed that I had an emotional affair anymore. I'm not afraid to tell the truth about everything. And it's been really easy. So right now it's been promoting the book. that was an exceptional process. I worked my ass off to write the book. I mean, it was so hard, but it was so wonderful. Spending a lot of time with my mom and dad and preparing for this trial conclusion that we have. You know, really rebuilding my house and doing community events. I just went to one the other day and the community was really engaging and I got a lot of hugs and got a lot of support from people. And so, yeah. And working with Tim, I know you were talking to Tim's story, being able to engage with Tim and figure out where my next step is. And am I going to be talking to women in prison? Am I going to be talking to people that have been through the same things that I've been in? Like it's really, I'm rebuilding everything, and it's been really great to figure out what the next move is for me.
That is really exciting. I mean, and listen, by the way, you have a book out, but the money from that book is going to your restitution, correct?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
how much do you owe?
Currently, I owe a little over 200,000. Every time that I get a big check, I give it to the government, and I do plan on civilly suing some of the other people that were engaged in my crime and seeing if I can get some compensation for the restitution with their culpability of the crime.
Right. Okay. So you are planning on going after James.
Absolutely. Now that I have the courage and the ability to, yes, absolutely.
And potentially, will you go after the police department? I mean, can you go after them? I don't know.
I don't really have the motivation to do that.
Okay.
Frankly, I think there's quite a lot of culpability on my part because I was never honest with them.
Okay.
I mean, they have the opportunity to talk about their mistakes and their missteps that they made, but frankly, I'd like to work with law enforcement to prevent that in the future.
Got it.
I don't have any motivation to harm law enforcement. I think that there's some things that can be improved on,
Right.
and I'm happy to work with them, but
Do you agree that it might not be necessarily a conspiracy? It might just be because they were so sort of exhausted because they found out this was a big lie and then chose to not go down any other road because they just thought it was like crying wolf and it was over.
yeah.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
get that.
and people have said that before. They've said it's like the girl that cried wolf, but even in the legend of the girl that cried wolf, she still gets really hurt in that.
Right. Oh, of course. Well, I'm not saying that you weren't hurt. I'm assuming that you were very hurt.
Yeah.
But you do agree that the responsibility lies within getting James to take responsibility, and whether that means going to jail or whether it just means almost like freeing you by him saying, yeah, I had something to do with this. And whether or not he goes to jail almost kind of doesn't seem the point. It would almost free you from people thinking that there is this big lie and then you continue to tell one, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think James is quite dangerous. And for me, it's like I am out now. I'm telling the truth now. And James is capable of doing very dangerous things. And that's terrifying. That's very terrifying. And it's not just him. There was other people that were involved too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was in listening to him talk. The police were asking him to call you and see if he can get you on the phone and get you to admit what went on. Did that conversation ever happen?
No.
And have you ever spoken to him since the day you left his house?
No.
And have you ever thought, I mean, he went hemmed and hawed about how he didn't have your phone number and ridiculous conversation that went on and on and on. Have you ever thought about calling him?
No, I have no desire to speak to him ever again.
Got it.
The only time I think I will ever speak to him again is in a courtroom.
I got it. So you are actively going to pursue that.
Yeah.
Good. Last thing I'll ask you, and I think you've covered it a couple times, but what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about you, Sherri?
That I did it to myself, that I harmed my own body, that I'm even capable of doing anything like that I abandoned my children. Those are the big ones. The big ones are that people could actually consider that I would ever abandon my children and that I would harm my own body.
And what would you say to James if you could say anything to him?
You know what you did to me. You know what you did to me. Tell the truth. to everybody. You know that you participated in the way that you participated, and it's time to tell the truth. I did. You watched me go to prison for it. You watched me lose my entire life for it. You watched me burn for it. And it's time to tell the truth to everybody about what you did to me. I kept my secret, and I kept everything a secret, but you know what you did to me. To my children, to my family, to my community. It's time to tell the truth.
Sherri, thank you so much for being so open and honest today. I do wish you the best, and I hope that people that are listening do realize that there are people that lie all the time. There are people that lie for reasons, and you should probably look into yourself about the last time you lied and why you did it. It does not mean that you do not deserve a second chance, and it does not mean that you are not capable of being truthful in the future and now. Tell people where they can get the book.
You can find the book at sherripapinibook.com, and you can type in Sherri Papini doesn't exist on Amazon. Direct links are available on sherripapinibook.com.
I wish you the best of luck, Sherri. I can't wait to see how this story pans out, and I hope that you have some peace in your future, and I will check back in with you to make sure that you have your kids warm and cozy in your bed with you this year.
Thank you.
For Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for listening to Misunderstood. I'm your host, Rachel Uchitel. Please be sure to subscribe to the show and give us a 5-star rating and review. You can support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/misunderstood with Rachel Uchitel. Do you have ideas for the show or want to reach out? Email us at info misunderstoodpodcast@gmail.com. That's spelled MISS understood. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.